Hello everyone, it is 2 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Lauren Boucher. I am a digital teaching and learning coach with Pitt County Schools in Eastern North Carolina. Beth Madigan, my colleague, who is also a digital teaching and learning coach with Pitt County Schools, she's going to be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions as we're moving along, feel free to put them into the chat box and we will pause between each strategy to take questions and answer them as best we can. So we actually did this presentation. Whoops, let's cut that off. We actually did this presentation a couple of years ago with the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction Roadshow that traveled all around the state of North Carolina. And we got great feedback and some really good suggestions from teachers that I'm going to share with you today as well. So let's go ahead and jump in and get started. Some webinar housekeeping for you. I have posted the bit.ly link into the chat, but here it is as well if you want to just jot it down real quick. It is bit.ly/BCS-STEAM-Beyond. And again, use the chat box for any questions that you have. For certificates of participation, if you have registered for the BCS STEAM conference, there will be a closing keynote today, and the feedback form will go out after that. It will be emailed to you. Make sure you fill that out ASAP because it will close after 24 hours. Once you complete the form, a link will be sent to you that you can use to print or save your certificate. There is an email or a bit.ly here to direct questions to. I am not associated with Buncombe County Schools, so I will not be able to award any CEUs or anything like that. If you are outside of the BCS district, you will probably want to check with your LEA to see if you can get CEUs for webinars. I know that in our district, Pitt County, teachers are not allowed to get CEUs for webinars, so you just need to do a little bit of checking on that. For those of you who are eligible for CEUs, you'll get 0.1, which is equal to 1 contact hour for each session that you attend today. And it looks like it's up to your district to approve, but these sessions are being recommended for digital learning competency credit. And again, you'll have to attend that live session, closing keynote session this afternoon, and then fill out the form that is emailed to you in order to get those credits. Again, my name is Lauren Boucher. I'm with Pitt County Schools, and I would love to connect with you on Twitter if you are in the Twitterverse. You can find me at Boucher Lauren. So let's go ahead and jump in. The first strategy that I have to share with you is the human histogram. Now, I do want to say that these strategies were designed for pre-COVID times. For regular classroom instruction, I am going to be sharing with you some remote learning tweaks. So some of these may have to be in your back pocket for when we go back to normal. But that's okay. We teachers, and I see Lucy has already said, tweaks are us. Teachers are the most amazing people for finding a way to make it work no matter what. So in the human histogram, this is a great way to pre-assess your students and find out what they know without having to pass out pen and paper and give them some kind of boring pretest. So the way that the human histogram works is you kind of set the tone or set the stage that across the front of your classroom or across your classroom is a continuum. And so at one end of the room is the I know nothing about this topic, I don't even know what you're talking about, never heard it before. And at the other end is the I am an expert, I can teach this end of the continuum. And so you have your students kind of put themselves on this continuum with where they think they are based on their level of understanding. And so when you do this, what you'll find is that your students have kind of clustered together at different areas along this line. Within those clusters, have them discuss questions that they may have if they were towards that end where they didn't know anything, or what they know or what they think they know if they were clustered towards the end of the experts. And then once you've given them, 1 or 2 minutes to kind of talk and share with each other, have someone from each cluster share out one thing that they talked about within their little cluster groups. Let the students adjust themselves once, and when I have that one student share out, I usually start with my expert, quote unquote, students, because typically they'll say something, and one of the students at the other end of the line who said they don't know anything, they'll do that forehead slap and like, oh, I totally know what you're talking about, and then they can adjust as they need. So I usually go through this process 2 or 3 times, asking a different question each time to kind of spur their thinking a little bit. I may give a little bit of a hint. In that first round, I'll usually have someone to define what the topic is or give just a little bit of background. And so I'm actually doing a little bit of teaching while this is going on. But what you'll find at the end of this activity is that the students, are feeling more comfortable with the topic, and you don't have anybody left at the end of that I know nothing line. Everybody has been able to kind of move themselves at least a little bit further down the line as they needed. They've gotten up out of their seats. I've got dings going on all over everywhere. Sorry. And I lost my train of thought. They've moved. Everybody knows a little bit of something. They've been up out of their seats. And I, as a teacher, don't have to grade a pre-assessment, but I know where my students are. So a tweak that I kind of thought about for if we were doing this in a remote learning situation would be to create either a Google Jamboard or a Google Drawing where you put, a line all the way across, label one side I know nothing, label the other side expert, and have the students either put a digital sticky note with their name on it, or let them pick a shape from Google Draw and put their name in the shape, but just place themselves digitally along that line. And if you're doing this with a video conference, you could have a few students from each cluster to share, and then go back again, let them move, pose another question, let them move again. So they're not physically getting to move, but they are getting to show you where they feel they are and their level of understanding, and getting to talk with one another and that kind of thing. All right, before we move on to the second strategy, the Graffiti Gist protocol, I'm going to pause for questions about the human histogram. And when I'm broadcasting live through YouTube, there's always there's a little bit of a lag. So I talk, and then I have to sit here and wait because you're hearing what I'm saying about a minute behind I've actually said it. So I'm going to wait and give everybody just a couple more seconds to get any questions in that you might have. If you don't have a question, maybe give a thought about how you might tweak this either for your age group, or how maybe you could think about doing this in your classroom, with a reduced class size. Do you think that students don't want to label themselves as know nothing? That could definitely be a concern, Lisa. So what might be another label that we could give, the end of that continuum where they don't know as much. So that's a great point. If anybody has a suggestion, definitely feel free to post that to the chat. I am going to tell you or share with you some suggestions that we've had from teachers in the past. If you're doing this in the classroom, it would be great to have signs on the floor or on the wall with the ranges so that the students know where to go, rather than just saying, okay, this end you're here and this end you're there. Give them some kind of visual clues. There was a lot of concern that students would not really be honest with their true level of understanding, that they would just go where their friends are going to go. So a kind of a way to keep that from happening is give the students sticky notes, or have them on a sheet of paper write down their kind of number of level understanding, if you wanted to number it rather than just an all or nothing kind of thing. Have them put that number of where they're going to go before they go there. And so that way you can kind of check, oh, you said that you were a 1, but you're hanging out down here with the 6s. So having them label where they're going to go before they move might keep them more honest. Have specific questions ready to go if you're doing different rounds. And then someone even suggested doing the human histogram again once you've finished teaching the lesson. And so kind of another way to formatively assess what they know after you've taught it. Jessica shared the word novice in the chat. That is a much better way of saying know nothing. Individual whiteboards, Jan, that's a great idea as well. All right, so we're going to move on to the second strategy, which is the Graffiti Gist protocol. So again, this is designed to be done where students can actually be close and clustered together and working and talking in a confined space, which obviously is not going to work now. But I feel confident that we can definitely make this work online, but even come up with ways to make it work when we have to socially distance in the classroom. So this is what a graffiti gist actually looks like at the end. So this is a protocol. There are specific steps that you will have to go through, but you'll notice here that the writing is all different directions. It's in completely different colors, and there's a reason for that. But this is kind of the end product. The way that you get here, and again, we'll post the link to the presentation because this is a link to an actual protocol. I created this with S'more, but you could definitely do this with just a regular Google Doc. So this is a Graffiti Gist protocol that we did with our teachers in the district on what is blended learning. So the first step is that everybody picks a color, and everybody needs a different color. And then everybody chooses a resource. Now, if you look here, we have, I think it's 8 or 9 different resources that the teachers or the students could choose from. We've labeled these as either an article or a video or an infographic. And we did this because everybody likes to learn differently. I love watching a video. I taught myself how to crochet watching YouTube videos, and I make really pretty stuff. My colleague Beth, on the other hand, if you give her a video to watch, you have immediately tuned her out. She's done. She's going to play it, but she ain't paying attention to it. She would rather read some bullet points and move on. So when you're curating your resources, make sure that you are finding resources that would appeal to different learning preferences for your students. So we've picked our color, we've picked our resource, and then we give a few minutes to read, watch, or review the resource. Once you've done that, and again, there's usually 4 to 5 typically around 4 people in a group. We've given each group a piece of chart paper, and you're not allowed to turn the chart paper. So whatever angle you are oriented to the chart paper is the angle that you're going to write on. And so what you do is, after you read or watch your resource, you pull one aha statement or one really thing that stood out to you, and you write that with your color on your angle on the chart paper. Now, we have students and teachers who will write something. We have students and teachers who draw something, and that's a really fun thing to see, is when somebody chooses to record their learning with a graphic. That's really cool, and it's a graffiti poster, so that is encouraged. Step number 3 of the Graffiti Gist is that everybody in the group will get 60 seconds to talk about what they learned in their resource. During that 60 seconds, you are the only person who is allowed to talk, and everybody else in your group is taking notes on what you're saying on that poster. So, before we get started, we tell everybody don't write big, and also leave some space in the middle, because there's going to be something else that goes into the middle of that chart paper. But we encourage them to fill it up as much as they can around that center piece. So with 4 or 5 people in a group, this one step is going to take 4 to 5 minutes, because everybody is going to get 60 seconds to share. So if there's 4 people in my group, I'm talking for a minute and I'm writing for 3. When you do this with students, make sure that you tell them before they start reading or watching that they are going to be required to share their learning. We learned this lesson the hard way the first time we did it. Students, when we told them that they needed to share for 60 seconds, we got the deer in the headlights look like, you didn't tell me I was going to have to do that. I need to go back and reread. So let them know up front what the expectation is going to be once they've read or reviewed. Once everybody has had their turn to speak and everybody has taken notes, then you move on to step number 4. Step number 4 of the Graffiti Gist is that as a group, you decide on the 7 to 8 most important words on your poster. And however your group decides something is important is up to that group. It may be words that were used over and over and over again on the poster, or it could be the ones with the most letters in it. I don't know. However your group decides what the most important words are. And then here's the fun thing. You have to take those 7 or 8 words and write a summary statement about the topic that we were studying. So for this one, this kind of hits all of the 4 C's. You've got communication, they're creating something, they're working together collaboratively, and I don't know about you, but if you've ever tried to summarize something in 7 to 8 words, and kind of 7 to 8 random words, that is some critical thinking involved in that. So I love the Graffiti Gist for hitting all the 4 C's. It's just a really great thing. And so if you have time, you can have the groups that maybe finish early design a Google slide like we have for this one down here, and I'll show you some examples here. If time is short, then we just have the groups put their gist statement, that summary statement, in the center of their poster and share out that way. So here is an example of Google Slides that teachers put together. I'm sorry if you can, we got some dumpster action going on outside of our office. I think they're emptying the industrial dumpsters. And this is taking its sweet little time to come up. With Google Slides, you can have, not only can they add their gist statement, but they can also add images that support that statement. So collaborative instruction facilitated by the teacher while students utilize technology to navigate lessons at their own pace in a non-linear fashion. Again, these were all statements that were written about blended learning. And what's really cool about the Graffiti Gist is that even if you went into the activity not really knowing anything about the topic, you come out of it sounding like a master's degree level expert on the topic. Because you're within 30 minutes, you're able to disseminate the information in 5 to 6 different resources and bring it all together. So some different suggestions from teachers, and this goes back to why I said everyone needs to choose a different color, because at the end of the Graffiti Gist, my groups are going to turn in their poster, but before they do that, they're going to turn it over and they're going to write their name in the same color marker that they used on the poster. That way I know exactly who contributed what to the process. Again, make sure to let students know that they're going to have a full minute that they need to talk. Think about providing an extra minute at the end of everybody's share time for students to finish writing their thoughts. That was a big stressor for some of our students, is that this can be really fast-paced if you want it to be, but it stresses students out when they can't finish their thought. So maybe allowing one extra minute at the end to let them get everything down that they wanted to get down. It would be a great kind of follow-up activity to put up all of your Graffiti Gist posters and do a gallery walk kind of activity, and examine all of the statements for trends and themes, important vocabulary. You can take it one step further and have your students write a class gist statement from all of the gist statements that were done the first round. And again, this activity hits all 4 C's. This was developed by Abby Futrell. She is with Edgecombe County Schools now. She has done work with the Friday Institute. She is absolutely amazing. Again, I use S'more to create this, but it could be done with a Google Doc or a Google Site. The process would be to curate your resources. Again, remember to appeal to all different learning preferences. Here are the materials that you would need, and an example for you there. Some remote learning tweaks. Again, using a Google Jamboard or a Google Slides for your posters. Each group would get their own page on the Jamboard or their own slide on the Google Slide. They would just, instead of using markers, they would pick their color text. And then if you wanted to do some virtual collaboration, you can use breakout rooms in Zoom, or even different topics in Flipgrid per group. So I'm going to pause here for questions before we move on to number 3, written conversations. I see Jan has suggested using Glogster. It is very similar to a jigsaw strategy at the beginning of this, but I think the piece that sets this apart is drafting or creating that gist statement at the end of it. And I love including that last piece of having them put their statements on a Google Slides, because I can print those and make those posters, or I can share that presentation and there's a study guide for the topic that we covered. All right, I don't see any questions coming through, so we're going to go ahead and move on to the next topic or the next strategy, which is written conversations. And this is silent, active, speak. I really enjoy doing this one. It's really cool. So it's a great way to build communication skills through writing, and I think maybe more so than all but one of the strategies I'm going to share with you today, this one really could be done completely digitally. But the way that you set up a written conversation is students read a selection or sections of a selection. So you find a research article, a news article, something that you want the students to read. And you're going to break that up, and every student in a group, so you could do pairs, you could do triads, groups of 4 or 5. I probably wouldn't do more than 5 in a group, but however many students you're going to have in each group, that's how many sections or selections you want them to read. If it's a short article, you could have them all read the same thing, and then have them do different things with the article. But the way that we've always done it is finding a lengthy enough article where the students can each get a section to read. We give, not a lot of time. We want it to be time bound so that the students, can get through everything. So maybe the first read or first round would be like 3 or 4 minutes, depending on the age of your students and the ability of your students. So they read their part, and after reading it, they're taking notes directly on the page that they were reading, on the selection that they were reading. And it could be, if you have taught them how to annotate or had a specific way to take notes, maybe you want them to apply that now. Maybe you give each person in the group a different task. So you're my vocabulary person, so you're going to underline and take notes on vocabulary words. You're my grammar, parts of speech person, you're going to pull out these parts of speech. However you want to give everybody a job, but I would set a purpose for each round of reading. So what's going to happen is after they've read, they've taken notes, they can write messages to each other about what they read on this piece of paper. They're going to pass it. And so we're going to do that same process again. If I have taken the same article but chunked it into different pieces, every time I pass my piece of paper, I'm going to be looking at a different section of that piece. If the article wasn't long enough and we're all looking at the same, even when we pass it, we're looking at the same thing, again, that's when you would give everybody a specific focus or a specific job that they are looking for or taking notes on. I have given some links here for a blog post written by Tavia Clark. Again, she was with the Friday Institute. I believe she is now moved out of state onto bigger and better things. She is wonderful though, so definitely check out her blog post. And there's a list of how to do this protocol. When we have done this activity with teachers, we did 4 rounds. So the article that we found, we broke into 4 pieces. Round 1, everybody just read their piece and annotated it and took notes on the margins or within the text of the document. Second round, we pass. At this point, important pieces have been underlined from the person who read our piece before us. So as the second reader on, I really don't have to read that article word for word. I can just read the notes that were taken by the person in front of me and kind of skim and read what they've underlined or marked up in that article. Round 2, though, my job is to, in the margin somewhere, ask a question that the person who's going to get this after me has to answer. So round 3, we pass. Again, I'm scanning whatever has been underlined. I'm reading the notes in the margins. I find that question. I answer the question. And my job is to make a connection with something else that we are learning about. And I'm going to write that in the margins as well. Pass it. Fourth round, my job is to again scan and respond to the notes. And then I need to summarize what everyone has said on the page. Now again, this is written conversation. So the whole time that this protocol is happening, the room is silent. The only thing that I'm hearing is when papers are being passed. That's why we call it silent active speak, because there are conversations going on, they're just written. So this is one way that you can kind of set up written conversations. If you have old file folders, you could use those. When we did this, I just shrunk down the article just a little bit to leave more room in the margins, so that everybody, because I didn't have a whole bunch of extra folders that I could mess up for this. So lots of different ways to kind of structure this. Again, if the article that you really want to do this with is not long enough to break it up into sections, make sure you give everybody a different purpose for each round when it's being passed. Some suggestions from teachers that we did this with is when you're doing it with your students, think about grouping students with like abilities, and then using a resource like Newsela to differentiate. So I may group my students by Lexile level, and then use Newsela to generate articles that are on the same topic, giving the same information, but it's just on my students' reading levels. I think with this, smaller groups are better. 3, probably no more than 4, and that may even help you to be able to chunk your article that you find. Adjust timing if needed based on your students' stress level and anxiety level, or their reading ability. We definitely want to give students time to get their thoughts down, and even consider maybe having one extra round at the end for them to get their original piece back, so that they can see what all was written after they saw it that very first read. So I'm going to pause. That is written conversations. I'm going to pause to take any questions before we move. Oh, I'm not. Go ahead and put your questions into the questions box. But here are some remote learning tweaks that you may want to try out if you are virtual this year. Rather than printing the article on different pieces of paper, do this with Google Docs or slides where each group gets their own copy. And each section would be on a different slide or a different doc. So they're just, instead of passing a piece of paper, they're just moving through a document. Have students highlight and annotate in different colors. If you go back and look here, you'll see that the writing was done in different colors for the same reason that we chose different markers for the Graffiti Gist. So that I know who did what, who contributed what. And so if it's digital, have them type or highlight in different colors. And we could definitely make use of the commenting feature with Google Docs or slides for those written conversations. Beth, any questions come through that?
Somebody asked, does that have to be a cold read?
I don't think it would have to be a cold read. I don't see any reason why you couldn't do something that's familiar to them. Maybe pull out pieces on topics if it's a reading class that you've been talking about, like theme and summarizing, different things like that. I'm not seeing any other questions coming through. Beth will let me know if something does. We're going to go ahead and move on to hexagonal thinking. I absolutely love this strategy and was completely blown away by it and all the possibilities when I first learned about it. And it is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. So we're going to use hexagons to connect ideas. This is a great way to brainstorm and connect ideas. You can use colored hexagons if you're trying to connect multiple ideas, or you can just use all the same color hexagon. I have provided you with different templates where you can print out the hexagons, and a Google Docs template here, and these are some articles that go more into depth on how to use hexagonal thinking. But the way it works is you give everybody in your room a hexagon, a paper hexagon, and then you give them a topic, and they put one idea onto their hexagon. So for this activity that we did, we were discussing the differences between a completely traditional classroom and a completely digital classroom. So this first round, this first hexagon that all the teachers got, that was the topic, was a completely traditional classroom. And so they all wrote one thing. Somebody wrote textbooks, we've got classroom in rows, lecture, chalkboard, routine. And once they wrote their ideas down, we came together into a centralized space in the room, and everybody just started laying their hexagons down onto the table. And as they began laying them on the table, we could see ideas that were related or similar or the same. And so we started lining those up with each other to kind of create this honeycomb of related ideas. Now, I could have stopped right there and asked another question that maybe got us thinking a little bit deeper, like, okay, how could we rearrange these based on teaching strategy? Or how could we rearrange these based on motivational factors in a traditional classroom? And so I could keep asking question after question, and we could continue to reform and reconnect the hexagons. So this just, like, I love this. Like, we could keep going on and on and on. So we did. So I sent everybody back, and I gave them a second hexagon, and I asked them, okay, now let's imagine a completely digital classroom. So the students, it's not really like virtual. We're all in the class, but we all have devices and all of our instruction is online. What would that look like or sound like? And so again, they wrote down one idea on their hexagon. We came together and rearranged. Somebody may have seen something that they really didn't feel like belonged where it had been put, and they would move it to the other side, and then somebody else would go, oh, okay, now I see that maybe I can move this over here, and it's completely fluid. It's just the coolest thing ever. So notice that in this one, we're writing all in red. In the second round, we're writing all in green. We did a third round. So in the third round, our overall topic was blended learning. So we talked about, or I gave them the prompt, okay, now imagine a blended classroom. What might that look like? What might that sound like? And so again, they wrote one idea down onto their hexagon. They arranged it how they wanted, and so my final challenge was, how can we now use these hexagons to connect those two opposing ideas or those two opposing environments? And so then we began rearranging in a way to connect our red hexagons to our green hexagons with the blue in the middle. That was a very abstract and complicated activity. Again, I was working with adults. With students, especially younger students, they can draw pictures or they could write, but maybe we only go through one round and we just, rearrange however we want to here. Some suggestions from teachers that we did this activity with is that it would be really fun to do this throughout the year to see how the different topics that we've learned about in science, math, and social studies and ELA, how all of those could be related or connect to each other. So maybe having a designated bulletin board or a designated space in the classroom where every time we learned something new, we stuck it on a hexagon and then added it to this live bulletin board that could be rearranged. It took us, Beth, how many hours did we spend cutting out hexagons? We did not have a die cut of hexagons, so we actually, for 8 sessions, cut out hexagons for teachers. So a suggestion came through to laminate your hexagons. If you're going to cut them out, cut them on cardstock and laminate them so that you could use dry erase markers and reuse. Obviously, if your school has a die cut machine, invest in a hexagon die so that you could just stamp that sucker. You could, if you're going to reuse your hexagons, go ahead and add a magnet to the back of them and use your whiteboard as a much easier way to kind of put them up on display and move them around. So to do an activity like this, if you are remote or virtual, would be to use Google Drawing and the hexagon shape tool. Students could create their own hexagon, or you could create the shape for them and they could duplicate it and put their ideas onto that, and then use your Google Drawing canvas as kind of your build tool. And then you could also use Google Slides, and again, the hexagonal shape tool. Be sure when you do this, if you use Google Slides or Google Drawing, to go down to File and Page Setup. That way you can make that canvas as big as you want it for moving the hexagons around, and you could use the zoom in and zoom out if you needed to. So before we move on to our next tool, are there any thoughts or questions coming through? Jan is a superstar. Thank you all for putting in your ideas and sharing your thoughts. Doing it in ELA to support details, sorting details by text structure, great ideas. All right, I'm going to keep moving because I've got 2 more that I want to share with you, and I'm running a little short on time. The next strategy, digging deeper, it's very similar to a gallery walk where you've got chart paper put up around the room and the students move from paper to paper. But instead of doing this to view work, what we're going to do on the chart paper is we're going to post questions on whatever topic we're studying. In small groups, so not just, every man for himself, but in small groups, we're going to have students move from poster to poster. In the first rotation, and again, this is going to be kind of like the first read, the students are going to need longer because they're going to be the ones to answer the question on the poster. So typically give them 3 to 4 minutes. Everyone in the group contributes something to the poster. And then in the next rotations, again, we're going to shorten those for time's sake, 2 to 3 minutes, because it also kind of makes it time bound, and you're going to have less behavior issues with this. But instead of the other groups are free to add any new ideas to the poster. But if someone has already said something that they agree with, we can use icons, and the students can use icons to kind of share their thoughts. So they're going to place a check mark beside comments they agree with, question marks that they have comments that they may have a question about, or they didn't really understand what that other group was trying to say, and exclamation points beside comments that they feel are really important. And so once all the groups go through the rotation, then we kind of come together as a class and go back through everything to talk about what has been added to the posters. And it's really a great feeling when somebody has put a check mark or an exclamation mark beside something that you have said. It really validates your thinking. So a remote learning tweak for this could be doing this instead of up around the room. We're going to do this with Google Slides. I'm going to put one question per slide. In the kind of gray space that's outside of the slide itself, you can provide icons. You can provide the check mark, the question mark, and the exclamation mark the students can just duplicate and drag onto the slide beside comments that they agree with. They could also utilize the commenting feature, or you could use Flipgrid and set up different topics within a grid instead, and each topic would be the question that you would put onto the poster for the gallery walk. Let's see. I didn't really have any suggestions from teachers for the digging deeper. What thoughts might you all have about making this work in whatever situation you're going to be facing when your students come back? Not seeing anything come through, so I'm going to move on to our very last instructional strategy, which is Blind Kahoot. Kahoot is a tool, a digital tool that I'm sure most of you are familiar with. It's kind of like a game where you set up questions and the students sign in using a game code, and they answer the questions that you ask, and they can earn points if they answer quicker and correctly. And the music is really annoying, and it's not my favorite thing in the world because I am super competitive and I never win because the answers aren't there on the screen. I've got to, on my device, I've got to look up and back. It drives me bonkers. But there is a different way of using Kahoot, and it's called Blind Kahoot. And in a Blind Kahoot, blind is referring to the fact that you're going to ask questions that you know your students don't know the answer to. But by posing that question, we're building anticipation, we're building curiosity to know the answer. And so I pause between blind questions to do a little bit of instruction. You can add videos to questions in Kahoot, so utilizing that feature to do some teaching. The way that you structure a Blind Kahoot, there is an actual formula to this. The first thing that you need to decide is what is your main goal for the lesson or the unit, and then that's going to be your first blind question. So your overall goal, what do I want my students to know? That's the very first question. Then you kind of chunk your lesson into topics or standards or different things that you're going to want them to know. You can call them milestones if you want. And each of those milestones or each one of those chunks has a blind question. So every time you ask a blind question, you're going to follow it up with videos and other questions that promote thinking and promote discussion about the topic that you are trying to teach. And then once you have taught it, you'll repeat the blind question so that the students can feel some success that they now know the answer to that the question that you asked that they didn't know the answer to before. I have shared several Blind Kahoot resources with you, as well as a template that you can find in Kahoot. It's very useful. You just make a copy of the template in your Kahoot account and then insert your questions and insert your resources. It makes it super easy. So when I did Blind Kahoot I did it with a 5th grade class, and getting their feedback, they loved this. They said they much preferred learning this way over like a pretest or a regular lesson. They do like that competitive feel, and the music doesn't annoy them. But they really, really liked Blind Kahoot. Did I put? No, I didn't. So because Kahoot is a digital resource anyway, this would lend itself great to doing video conferencing with your virtual students, and would really work in a virtual environment. What I love about each one of these strategies that I've shared with you today is that every single one of them gives a voice to each student in your classroom. Whether that student is comfortable sharing in class or being involved, being active in group discussions, no matter what your student's comfort level is, they have a voice in every single one of these strategies. They all encourage communication and collaboration, which again, if we can make the necessary tweaks to do these remotely or with smaller groups where we have to be more spaced out and socially distanced, still great ways to build communication and collaboration skills. They all promote a safe environment for students to think critically and take risks, and they promote student ownership of learning, because in a lot of these we really are putting the responsibility of learning the content onto the students. So those are the strategies that I have for you today. Again, if you have any last-minute questions, feel free to drop those in the chat box. I would, again, love to connect with you on Twitter. I am at Boucher Lauren. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for taking your summertime to do a little bit of professional development and get yourselves ready for your students, no matter what this year is going to end up looking like. I will add to the chat box one more time the bit.ly for the presentation. It is bit.ly/BCS-STEAM-Beyond. Thank you all, and you have a great afternoon.